Very happy to have with us today Jonathan Colman, the electric bassist based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Jonathan primarily plays with his band Muscle Tough, an electric trio, and he also hosts instrumental nights for the Funkin' Bowl and Dungeon Crawl. So Jonathan is extraordinarily talented on his instrument, and I just want to thank you for coming on today.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here with you, Abe. And speaking of extraordinarily talented on their instrument individuals, you, sir, are one.
I'm still practicing every day or when I can, but
I'm
thank
still
you.
trying to as well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
hopefully
think
one
I'm
day I'll
getting
figure it out.
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to ask you was, we all kind of have that moment in our lives where, music is just a hobby, maybe something we get enrolled in as a kid, but then there actually becomes the distinction where you become serious about it and then going to pursue a career. So when did the light switch kind of go off for you where you knew it was something you really were going to get serious about?
I can answer that. I'll give you like a little preamble and then I know the exact moment. So I started music what I consider late. I didn't start playing an instrument until I was like a freshman in high school. And before that, it was like maybe I'll call it the age of TRL and rap rock and things like that were very interesting to me and I wanted to rap and I breakdanced and I was printing out moves and carting empty cardboard boxes around the neighborhood and battle dancing kids and battle rapping and like so that was the true first that is music, and it was something that deeply like compelled me and it pushed me on to the point where by the time I heard an electric bass through an amp in high school, I ended up getting involved in musical theater, chorus, and everything. And then I heard that, and I was like, oh, yo, like I ran to the room, and like the kid taught me brain stew right there. Like, I went home and I was like, Mom and Dad, I want to be a bass player, and they're like, what's that? And
Well,
so it went on, and I was like playing it more, just practicing and being interested. But it was eventually, I think, my like junior year of high school, I went and saw Fish for the first time. And just at that concert, I was like, oh, yeah, that's what I want to do. Like, this is awesome. Now, who doesn't want to rock arenas and stuff like that? But it was the nature of like the improvisational approach to the music that like really intrigued me, and I'm still on that path.
yeah, it's interesting you say it was Fish and it was like a really big concert because we all have, I mean, I tend to find that when I speak to people, it usually is that one moment like where you see someone very specific. Like for me, it was Joe Satriani, but I'd seen other concerts before that. So
Wait, what Joe Satriani concert environment was this? What
oh, this
was
was
it?
at PNC in Homedale, New Jersey.
Was it Stu Ham on bass?
I
You don't
think
have to know.
I think it was Matt Bissonette was playing bass at the
Okay,
time.
nice, nice, nice.
Yeah, but that was I mean, you saw Fish, and when you saw them right away, did you know that they were improvising and it was a jam band, or you just kind of looked at
Yeah,
it?
I had got into it a little bit by rote. A friend of mine put something on at a party and it had like a really awesome slap bass line, and that was my in. Because at first I was like, culturally, bullyish on it like a little bit, just like, not for me. Like that music sucks. Like that scene is whatever. And then I heard the slap bass thing. I was like, oh damn, like that really intrigued me. So I had done a bunch of listening, and at this time, that band was actually not playing. So I was of the mind that I wouldn't ever see them. It was like over. And then they like, I guess that year I got into them, they came back for some more, and I was pleased to go.
And then I know you went to study, music formally in college. So is that how was the environment for that? Going into because before that it seemed like it was more of I guess, a hobby, right? And then going into the formal music school must have been a big change, right?
Yeah, like I studied privately, and I had bands like right away, but I didn't have like all that time like in front of a music director or anything like, or even just with sheet music that much. So it's like when I went to audition, actually they were like, you know what? Why don't you go home and take some singing lessons, take some piano lessons, take some overall like buttress your fortress, you know. One of my first teachers would always say, "You got this great tower you're building, right? And it's getting so tall. But like we got to make sure like the plumbing and the foundation and like all of the stuff that's going to allow for the success of your scope to come forth." So this school I'm talking about here is Duquesne University,
Right.
and so I did go home and I got some piano stuff going on. I tried to get my sight singing, and it was brutal. It was like I really didn't want to do it, but the idea of doing anything else outside of music was like it just seemed like there was no other alternative. So I was like, here
Was
I am.
when you went back and had to pursue it, was it like were you disheartened or was it more you like the fuel that gives you like, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna show you like which one was it you think?
Honestly, and this is like I'm so grateful. You know, it's Veterans Day today. My dad is a Marine, and you know, one of the things I really get from him is a little bit of a grit, determination, and follow through. And so, like, I was motivated. I was like, I'm going back, and I'm doing better at all that stuff, and I did. And they were like, great, like we'd love to have you, and they do that. That's how they like sift out like you know, if we let this kid in, is his enthusiasm going to overwhelm him in the first semester and he's out? You know, it's like, I like, you know, they kind of spared my family that. And then I showed that I had a little bit of the merit and the chutzpah. And I ended up having a great 4 years at Duquesne. And I learned so much. I mean, you could have put all blues in front of me and I would have been like, what? Like, I wouldn't have known what to do. But then eventually I did learn, and I learned a lot about ear training, and they practiced movable do there at that school, so that really kind of fell into the way that I do my modal improvising, and really just showed me a lot. Mike Tamaro is a name you might know. He's an arranger who's done a lot, and I did like jazz harmony with him and big band arranging, and he really expanded my mind to understanding like jazz harmony and jazz vocabularies.
But did they remember you when you went back, or was it just like, who is this person? Like, do you
Okay, well,
remember?
the thing was, it was like I didn't get through too many doors with the auditioning. You know, it was like there was a few people, but they did remember that I came back. It was the same people, and they were, and you know, they were pleased with what they saw. They saw somebody that like went and took the time. So
Yeah, they probably don't, don't see that too often, I would imagine, because in the arts, it is easy to get disheartened about things. So I guess the next thing I wanted to ask you was about because when we worked together, you played upright, but I know you're primarily an electric bassist.
yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, the life of performing, and because I really want to know about what happens when you perform. What aspects of yourself only come out on stage because, we're only our music, our instrument gives us something we can't get from anywhere else. So let's because you've done so much, I want to kind of get into that.
Sure. You know, I feel like the right away the answer is rage.
Rage.
Like my any rage I have, even like on a subconscious level, just like the boiling manifestation of it all and all my logistics and commitments and feelings and fears and wants and joys. Like that there's like this like rage or this like powerful energy that will come through on stage that I really don't have like another outlet in my life besides like I would say like lifting weights. And it's like a funny correlation to be like I'm getting to that place in two ways, you know. I'm
So you
either
feel like
playing a concert.
it's a huge emotional release every time you play, you're saying.
Hopefully,
Hopefully.
hopefully. I mean, sometimes it's like sometimes logistics are such that there's no way you're getting released. In fact, you've been imprisoned in your own mind for the sake of the gig. Maybe it's like your gear's malfunctioning, you're half sick, somebody sent you a weird text, you looked at it right before you went on, like, like we have to mitigate a lot, but when it's right, I do feel like there is like a true catharsis that comes out in a way that you don't necessarily get from, like, resolving a grievance with somebody or something. It's like this more like deep universal kind of cry that I get to release.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you get sometimes things can go wrong, like you get these texts or you're not feeling well. There's always something usually happening. But in those rare circumstances where things seem to be going okay, what for you makes the band performance Like, because the average listener is going to say that was great, but
True. True. Yeah.
you know when it's great and when it's it could have been better. What things do you look for in terms of the way you interact with the other musicians or you're playing in particular that makes it like at the highest level?
Yeah, well, let's say there's a night where it's like I'm actually just really hearing myself with true like lucid clarity, and it's the imagination to the tip of the fingers, and it's just coming out. So if I'm not worried about my sound at all, I really do love a night that is quiet, even for rocking music and heady improvisations, like something with a lower overhead that isn't smashing. Like maybe there's like one big moment in the night that does get loud, but it's not like everyone's solo goes to 1,000 and then we come back to zero for somebody else and it goes to 1 billion and then it comes back to zero, and it's like that just like wears on the listener and also like us as like supporting accompanists. So whenever it's going really deep, I find that it's quiet. There's like this room for all of the textures to bloom and for people to hear each other and to not be really like responding to yourself, but
Even
responding
if
to the
even if
world.
there's a ton of people in the audience, you still feel like it has this layer of quietness or something on top.
Yeah, and then often I find that like that gets the audience's attention. You know what I mean? It's like what's brewing right now? Like what spell is being cast? Like I need to know what's going to happen next with this music. And hopefully like, audience and us players are all kind of like surfing that beautiful edge of expectation.
Yeah, and we can't get it from anywhere else. That's the thing. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. And you do something really unique with the band Muscle Tough is that you make the bass sound like a guitar, and the guitar does the opposite, and he makes it sound like a bass, I believe. Now
Yes, yeah.
that's a huge, you know, a risk to take. Would
Yeah,
you say?
especially when your pedals don't work.
Yeah, of course.
It happened. It happened like 2 weekends ago.
Do you think that when you guys do that in those moments, that's like the most stressful or the biggest risk you take that you have to like, okay, I'm like need to be ready to go. Is that, or are there other things that happen, you think?
Well, let me answer all of that. I don't find it stressful or a risk. I feel like we have sort of carved something out. And I want to drop a name. There's a bass player named Reed Mathis, who is the guy that pioneered this for me. I don't know where he saw it or heard it or if it just came from his inspirations and searching. But I had read a Bass Player magazine article talking about him, his band at the time, Jacob Fred Jazz Odyssey. He's still in the band, and he was talking about like listening to all this Coltrane live in Japan and using the whammy to go up into that realm. And right away I was like, okay, this sounds cool. So I'm like checking out Coltrane live in Japan. It's the age of Kazaa and LimeWire, so I'm looking for his band and I'm discovering Medeski Martin and Wood. What? So like all of that's going on. So very early on I got a whammy, which is taking us 2 octaves high.
The Digitech, right?
Digitech Whammy, and they make one that's specific for bass frequencies too. So the tracking is really nice, and it's polyphonous, and so I can do a 5 note chord if I if I have the wherewithal. And uh, Ross, the guitar player in Muscle Tough, he does the opposite. He goes low. We're both coming out of the respective amps too. So bass, we have 4 amps for 2 guys. And the cool thing about it, why I don't ever feel like it's a risk, is because of Ross's musical intuition. His like just his approach to bass as a role, not necessarily the instrument, is so authentic. It feels good. It feels really good. And some sound guys prefer his bass sound over my
It
regular
feels
bass.
when you guys switch, it feels natural. It feels
Yeah,
second
like
nature.
because I will say like and many of my peers would, if I've thrown them into a situation where I asked them to play bass in this regard, whether it's a keyboardist doing the little fatty or another guitar player using an octave pedal, not everyone like has that instinct. Not everyone has that like roll procedural ready to roll out. So fortunately, Ross produces a lot of music, plays a lot of instruments, and so it's like it is very seamless. So it's not like it doesn't become lacking or feel sort of like, I don't know, this isn't shade, but sometimes a guitar player that doesn't play bass will sound sort of like angular and boxy and maybe even overplaying. But that's coming from an overplaying bass player
No,
already.
but
So,
it's something that I never really heard about until, that I found out that you did it. Do you feel like you're innovating this in a way?
well, not because really, I'm just taking what Reed had laid down and finding my own thing with it. Like, I'm not playing his music or like
Right.
really. I haven't spent a lot of time being like, all right, I'm gonna get every one of his lines down. It's more like the spirit of what this person is doing is so true that I am willing to find my truth through the electronic devices that they're also using, and write my songs and have my voice with it all. So, I fucking love Reed. He's the man. He's
I
he's
have to
so
like go
cool.
investigate this person now.
Yeah, Reed Mathis. Oh my God, he'd be an incredible chat. He's a deep knowledge bank and just true conjurer, so I can't say enough about him.
I'm definitely going to check him out. Let's also talk about inspiration because, obviously you draw from, so much. You're talking about John Coltrane, you're talking about um, when you saw Fish. Where do you draw inspiration from that's completely unrelated to music, would you say?
Ooh, wow. That's so good. I was sitting here cooking up other music to talk about. I would say I have a new age spirituality that involves a lot of like trying to be present and like, I'd say supporting my nervous system being calm and connecting with what I would call the collective consciousness. So I do meditate, I do exercise and try to eat really well. And all of that, like, it ends up being a lot. Like, just trying to stay present for all the things that I'm able to get to do in a day.
Is it
So, like,
mindfulness
yeah,
type stuff?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's what I would say. Like, it's like not necessarily any sort of God centric, although like I would say that like I am a God person, not like a God of any particular make, but like a God that I couldn't mistake from like the feeling and some of the experiences I've gotten to have in my life where I'm like, oh, like there is divinity, there is great comedy, and when I'm really getting to like I'd say be out of my own ass and out of my own way, I get shown it all the time. And a lot of the times it's in moments like this with like a soul like you, like getting to just connect and like have common ground and like and have these affirming moments. It's like, yes, we are alive. We are on a path and like we do get better at it as we continue on it.
I heard a good quote. It's that we're all eyes in God's head or something like that, which,
Whoa. Yo, that's a great piece of art waiting to happen there.
yeah, I also wanted to ask you too, because, you're talking about the spirituality, component and being in the moment.
Yeah,
It's easier said than done when it comes to playing. So before
true.
you go out on stage, is there any mantra you might tell yourself, or do you like need to meditate right before you go on? Like what happens before you hit the stage?
You know what? Like I have learned to like not have any of that because in the times where I tried to have a routine, the great comedy would find me and break it and put me in a situation where I wouldn't be able to rely on that. So I don't have a ritual. I don't like have to have a certain cocktail or a certain stretch or breathing pattern. Like it's always so random, especially touring. If like I'm in an opening situation, it's like much of the day is the traveling. We're getting our gear on and off stage so quick, and before I know it, it's like I'm back standing at the merch covered in sweat. It's like I love
No,
it. So
I love hearing about this stuff. You're saying you just kind of you're living your life, and then the performance is just like any other thing. You just don't want to bring stress into it. Just kind of like, let's do it.
a friend of mine, a guitar player named Chris Parker, who I went to Duquesne with, and he lives in New York. Great player. You'd love his style. He said to me before, he's like, you're the only person that like I know that walks on stage, and it's just the same guy that I just talked to, being the exact same way, and then is the same off. And that was a kind of a great compliment to get. And it was certainly isn't always that way, and wasn't always that way, but I do find like that, like the short time that I get to play is just sort of a natural extension of who I am and what I'm up to. So there's
Yeah, no,
not too much.
So I know that the band is, your primary focus musically, I would say, performing right now, right? Muscle Tough.
Yeah, yeah, performing with Muscle Tough, and I have these nights that I host. Dungeon Crawl is a newer thing where I'm curating like just nights of pure improvisation. So trios have really lent themselves to it, but there's been a few quartets, and we just do two sets of pure modal improvisation. And I have like a little, um, I call it a document that I have for tuning in people into some of my thoughts and approaches for it, and I'll share it with you.
Yeah, let's talk about modal improvisation for a
Okay, okay.
second, because me personally, I would rather play modal than, I mean, I like playing on changes. I think playing on changes is its own thing, but there's something about,
You are marvelous at it. For anyone listening, they may know already, but I need to mention it.
well, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. And, it is challenging to play on, moving chord changes through keys and stuff. But I always kind of felt that. I mean, I love playing on one chord. There's something about one note, like a pedal tone or something, that just like it opens us up. What is it about just that idea, just the one note, not in one scale. I mean, just about staying in one mode or just one note. What is it about? Because I always feel like it's like almost like a vibration or something that happens that you just bounce off of, and it's like you don't have to worry about the moving parts, if that makes sense.
It really does. I want to echo that, and I want to say that it harkens back to the mindfulness stuff in a sense that it is so the moment, um, without having to like make sure you're dotting your T's and crossing your I's, or like with sometimes when you're playing through a tune with changes, it is that it's a song. It's this like it's a path that's being followed. But when you are just kind of conjuring things up off of a tonic, it does sort of feel like, especially if you're improvising, it's like, what's going to happen? Who's going to do what? Like, we're here already, but like, what could change? Where could this go? And there's just that sort of latent expectancy that is kind of exciting. And uh, I am a big fan of Claude Debussy's music. I know we're not filming, but I do have a little bust of him here on my desk.
Oh no, we
And
are we are filming. We are filming.
oh, okay, okay,
Yeah.
great. We're filming. Good. I'm glad I'm clothed. Um, so his music too, like he became so in a way like defiant of what was happening in classical music with Beethoven and all that. Like not like, casting it aside, but he fell in love with stuff that like wasn't always modulating and changing, like stuff that just kind of was like hanging out on a tonic, and then it was like precursor to modal jazz. Like that's why it's so many guys like Bill Evans and stuff, like they love his music because it's like it's in there, it's just moving seventh chords unrelated or hanging out on stuff. And that sort of like tuned me in too, like hearing that stuff early on and not knowing what it was, but just loving the way those spaces felt.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, if you were to break down all 12 notes and you make, minor, and then you make them all major and then make them all, seven or
Half
seven sus.
diminished and yeah,
There,
make them
it's
all
it
augmented major.
exactly. Miles Davis even said, when you play this way, you can go forever. That's like, direct quote from his that I read one time. But I always find it interesting because I wish that more, improvisers in the jazz world thought about playing more modally. And I think it's almost becoming like a lost art form in a sense.
Wow. Well, it's an interesting thought too, because as a modal guy, which not everyone like plants their flag down and is like, I'm gonna really focus my life on expanding on one chord. Although I certainly have, I'm always like, it'd be great if I spent time navigating changes. And it's like grass is always greener feeling in a way, but if we can get more people modally improvising, hell yeah. I think it's for the children. I mean,
No,
it's
I'm
the
I'm
easiest.
I'm all for it. Trust me. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about you mentioned that you went to study this music formally
Yes.
in school. I don't imagine that at the school they were like all the stuff that you're doing now you kind of learned on your own.
Oh, everything was on my own in a way. It was
Exactly.
like while I was there, like I don't want to finish if you have more to that.
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask you because what you're doing is something that goes beyond what what you would typically learn in music school. So if you could add your own, like make your mark on music education, like let's say there was the Jonathan Colman course at Berkeley or something, what do you think
Yeah.
what would you want to get across to students, whether it be on the bass or harmonically? What would you want to get them to understand?
I would like to present the number system to them in a way that is like akin to movable do. So it would be like a way. I think there's such importance to understanding like the chords that are born from the major scale, especially for like a bass player, like just playing songs. Like it makes your job a lot easier when you can come almost predict everything that will happen in the song, unless there's some sort of creative non-diatonic thing happening. But like getting people tuned into the number system, being able to like kind of deploy that and shift it over to all the 12 keys is a big part of that. And then from there, like I would just kind of start to stretch things around and be like, okay, like, well, that two is now your one. And now what does that make this? And kind of getting people's heads turned into that. So that's my quick answer to that.
And where do you see where do you want to see the band in, let's say, 10 years or something?
Wow, I would say making just so much money and having like incredibly patient audiences who are like stoked to come listen to like whatever the hell we want to play.
Do you think it's going to be, this is something you have to manifest and envision it before it actually happens,
Well,
you
I
know?
do I do a lot of that, and and I'm glad you mentioned that, the manifestation aspect of it. Like, one thing we do have, my wife and I, we do have manifestation journals where sometimes we write in a future tense, like a future past tense, where it's like you're recollecting on the abundance that you already have, even if it's like some crazy thing that you're just sort of just dreaming out loud. Like we kind of just start to put like rods out like that energetically to the universe. And like I've always been surprised, like I didn't know I'd end up where I am today. And I try to be more grateful for it. I don't know where I'm going to end up in a year. Something huge could come down the pike, and I'd have to say yes to it, and
Yeah,
then
you,
go.
you met, before we wrap up, I wanted to let's just one more thing I wanted to ask you because you mentioned the word grateful, which is something I didn't ask you to mention that word. What are you most grateful for in your career at this point? Maybe it's, because some people would say X amount of followers, some people would say I played here, got to play. What are you most grateful for at this very moment at 12:27 p.m., November 11th,
Yeah.
2024?
Well, I'm grateful to be employed first and foremost, and I'm doing music all on my own, and I'm really my own boss. I'm involved in a lot of beautiful democracies and maybe like one or two benevolent dictatorships that I'm happy to be on board. But beyond that, it's like I have to answer to myself, and I have to bring my own motivation to the table and follow through on stuff. And sometimes it's really hard. Like I said, like I don't know how things are gonna go, or sometimes I'm like I don't know how this month is gonna shake out, but they always do, and they push me forward. And I will say that I've had a lot of like things that I thought would be the thing for me happen. Like I have endorsements from companies that I like and believe in. I have become friends with a lot of my heroes, and they believe in me. And it's like that stuff is crazy, and when it happens you really have to like check yourself and like stay calibrated and stay humble. But then you end up on the other side of it and you're like, I'm still little old me. Like I still got to walk my path of integrity, and I got to like show up for the day just like everybody else.
Yeah, you mentioned like you get to become friends with, your heroes in a sense, and they become peers, but they're always that little aspect of like, oh, it's just, I'm still the same person right there.
Yeah.
Do you think that you're like is there still like, oh, like I am on the same level as this peer? Do you have like moments of that? Because I know it can feel that we still feel like,
I look up to my peers. Don't get me wrong, but I will say this much, and this is one of my big metrics: is I think about that guy that was going into his freshman year in college. Me, he would be floored. He would flip a table with my life right now, with how good it is. He'd be so pleased. And so, if that can be the metric, if my past self can be proud of me today, then I'm doing something right.
that's beautiful. I think, we need to think more like that. If my past self could see me today,
He'd be like,
because
dude, you're killing it. And, I can't always say that. I'm getting a little choked up, but it's the truth. It's the truth. It's like, I am proud of him and he's proud of me.
wow. No, I know, because it is so, we get so, you know, looking toward the future and wanting
Yes.
more and more and more. I mean, that's just the human condition, right?
Yeah, for
But
sure.
but you're saying that if your old self could see where you are today, he would be like, "Whoa,
He'd be freaking out.
beautiful."
They'd be like, I'll just stop now. You got it.
Well, anything, where can people find you if they want to discover more?
Sure. On Instagram, Friendship Wizard is my tag. It's also one of my artist nom de plumes. I have some singer-songwriter music out under Friendship Wizard. I'm also on Facebook. I have music on Spotify. Muscle Tough is on Spotify. We have a new record coming out in 2025. It's going to be awesome, mixed by John Davis from Nerve, great bass player and engineer at the Bunker in New York City. And I don't know. There's lots to be excited about.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, for doing
Thank
this.
you, Abe.